Like test.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
I can hear.
Hear me?
I can hear.
Right. Good morning. Thank you guys for joining us. So it's 10:30, so I'm going to get started. I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. So my name's Liz. I've been with CAD Masters for about 7 years. I teach the online classes at CAD Masters. So we typically teach AutoCAD, Civil 3D, and Revit. We also do a few other classes as well. You can check out our website if you're interested. Today should be about an hour just going over grading optimization. So grading optimization is inside of Civil 3D. Let's see. And so if you guys are wondering, I will be recording this and I'll be posting it on YouTube. So if you miss some of it, you can go back and rewatch it on YouTube. We have a CAD Masters YouTube channel. But yeah, so we typically teach AutoCAD, Civil 3D, and Revit, and a few extra classes. You can check out our classes that we offer online at cadmasters.com. If you're interested in getting the PowerPoint from today, feel free to send me an email. My email's right here. I'll just copy it into the chat. All right, so my email's in the chat if you want the PowerPoint from today. I think that's enough of an introduction. So let's get started. All right, so the benefits of using grading optimization. So I think I was about to say this and then I got sidetracked. Civil 3D is the program that offers grading optimization, right? So you have to be a Civil 3D user. So benefits of using this grading optimization tool, it saves you time by iteratively solving for an optimal grading solution based on target parameters with little user interaction. So typically, Civil 3D grading, there's a lot of take a good guess, give it a try, fix it, give it another try, fix it, give it another try. So this tool will do those iterations for you, and it gives you the mass grading of the site. So it's not going to do any fine detail grading for you, but it will give you the overall mass grading. You can set it up where it tries to balance the cut and fill, or you can say don't balance cut and fill because I'm digging a giant pond. It's going to be mostly cut, right? So you can put in whatever kind of design criteria that you want, and it will run through those iterations for you. So the project types that might benefit from using grading optimization are mass site grading, like I mentioned, setting building pad elevations, setting the mass grading of a parking lot, creating ponds, and then checking the storage volume. So you could put in your desired storage volume for your pond, and it will run through the iterations to try to achieve that. Okay, so I have a little note down here that I'll say first. So in 2022, 2023, grading optimization is considered an extension, and you must install it from your Autodesk account. So the same place you go, autodesk.com, to install Civil 3D, there should be another little link where you can go, same location, and you click to install grading optimization. So once it's installed, in 2024, it already comes with the program. But once it's installed, grading optimization tools are available on the Analyze tab of the ribbon. So here's a little screenshot. There's the Analyze tab. This is the Grading Objects button. When you click this button, there are two things that can pop up. So if this top button is blue, Grading Object Browser will open up. If this button is blue, Grading Object Tool Palette will open up. So if either of those buttons is grayed out, that means you just have to click on it to open it. So this main button opens two more things. Okay. In this slide here, I'm going to talk about the Grading Object Tool Palette. So the second button, this one here, opens the Grading Object Tool Palette, which looks like this. It allows users to define lines, polylines, and feature lines in the drawing as specific objects, such as grading limits, zones, building pads, and pond boundaries. So we are going to be doing a parking lot example and a pond example. And so I'll be showing you how we define these objects. So then in this tool palette, if you wanted to start a pond, for example, you would click on pond and then click on the outline of the pond. And so that outline can be typically a polyline, but you can also use feature lines. Once you've defined your objects, the second window, which again comes from here, so it's this little button has to be blue, this object browser pops up. So in the object browser, these are different categories of objects. So anything that you have defined will show up underneath these categories. So you can see in the screenshot, I had defined one pond object. If I had clicked on this little triangle, it'll open up and show me what I've defined. Right. So it says here, allows users to inspect which features have already been defined by the user and what properties such as slope rules they have been assigned. Right. So you can take a look at what you've done so far. Right. So we're going to get started. I have some steps to set up a project. So when you set up a project, first step is create a data shortcut for your existing ground. Sorry, I keep seeing pop-ups on the other screen there. So step one, we have to create a data shortcut for our existing ground surface because a data shortcut is a smaller surface than the original. And it's best to use the smallest surface possible because as it runs through these iterations, it takes a lot of processing power and it'll be really slow, and it is possible that it crashes with Autodesk products every now and then. But the better solution is to use data shortcuts to get your best results. Once you have a data shortcut for your existing ground, you can start a new drawing, XREF any design that you have, data reference that existing surface that you just create a shortcut for, create a new surface. And in my example, I'll call it grading optimization, and paste in your existing ground into that new surface. So not only are we using a data shortcut for existing ground, we're also pasting it into a brand new surface, again, just to try to reduce the amount of data that's going to be used for the optimization, right? And I will be doing all these steps. I'm just giving you a heads up of what we're doing. And again, if you guys want a copy of this PowerPoint, feel free to email me. I put my email in the chat. Yeah, and you'll see it later. I'll have it up on the screen again. So we are going to paste it into our new surface, and then we want to use an outer boundary to cut off the excess surface that we don't actually need, right? So I'm going to get started now. I'm going to put these this PowerPoint down. You won't be able to see it, but actually let me just copy paste the steps into the chat for you. So these are the steps we'll be running through. So for me, I have Civil 3D 2024 open. So I don't need to install grading optimization. It's already available. So I'll just go to my first step. I'm going to open up a drawing that has my existing ground surface. So I have it here. Drawings, existing topo. All right. So my existing ground surface is pretty large. If I click on it, you see that that whole thing is the surface. So I don't want to use that whole thing for grading optimization. It'll be super slow. It's often going to crash if it's way too big. So I have already set the path for my data shortcuts, and I already created a data shortcut for my EG surface. So I'm just confirming that I have my data shortcut. So now I'll close this drawing. My next step is to start a new drawing. So I'm going to go to new, making sure I use a Civil 3D template, of course. All right, so my new drawing, I'm going to save it. And I'll be overriding something I did earlier. So our first example will be a parking lot. So I'll override this one. Okay, now I've saved my drawing. I'm going to X-reference my design. So X-reference my base file. All right, so here is the parking lot that I'm going to be working on. So now I want to bring in my existing ground surface in tool space. Under data shortcuts, I have my EG surface right here. I'll create a reference. I'll just use border only. All right, so you'll see that the EG surface is huge. My parking lot doesn't need all of that at this time. So my next step is to create a brand new surface that I'll be using for the grading optimization. So surfaces, create surface. For the name, I'm just going to call it grading optimization. And this is going to be the starting point for the grading. It's going to take this surface and manipulate it to follow my design constraints, right? So grading optimization, in the end, maybe I want to look at 1 and 5 design. Post. Okay, so this is currently an empty surface. I'm going to start off by pasting the EG surface into it. So there's my EG. You'll see tons of contours pop up there. And then I want to crop this down to a smaller size, right? So I am going to create an outer boundary. So here's my parking lot. Let me actually send this surface to the back. And let me just draw a polyline, maybe out here. Oops. And I'll make sure it's a closed polyline. So I'm going to use that to be an outer boundary for this surface. So I'll add that. I'll use non-destructive so I get a clean cut boundary. I don't have any curves, but I have a habit of using 0.01 for mid-ordinate distance. Select the boundary. There it goes. Okay, so that is the surface that I'm starting with. It's much smaller than my original EG surface. Okay, so there it is. That's the one that it's going to start with. So next, let me bring up the steps. So that was just the setup work. That is really important. You should set it up that way. So here's our parking lot example. I know the steps are pretty small on the screen. I think I can copy paste them into the chat. It's really long, but it's in the chat now. So I'll be following these steps to get that parking lot set up. So first off, I'll go to the Analyze tab, Grading Optimization, and click on that Grading Objects button. Then I'll be in the Tool palette and basically assigning all of my grading objects, right? So I'll show you on my screen. Getting my other screen situated here. Okay, so first thing on the Analyze tab of the ribbon, we have on the right side, grading objects. So if you do not see this in your ribbon, you're probably in 2022 or 2023, and that just means you have to install it, right, from Autodesk.com. But once it's installed, here's grading objects. And so I'm going to minimize tool space right now. We have two windows that popped up because of these two buttons. I have Grading Object Browser and the Tool Palette. So Tool Palette in Civil 3D, it has a lot of different tabs. If you're working on corridors, you might be using some of these tabs. The tab that's for this task here is the Grading Objects tab. So, right, you might be on another tab when you first open this up. So just make sure you're on the Grading Objects tab. So from that tab, we are going to start defining these objects for this project. Okay, so first thing, we want a grading limit, right? We grade the inside of the parking lot, and then the outer edge of the parking lot needs to grade back to the existing ground, the eTopo. So I do have this parking lot as an XREF. So first thing I'll do is end copy some line work. So I'm going to copy the outer edge of the parking lot. Okay. All right. So this is the outer edge of a parking lot. It is just a polyline, but it's open at the driveway. So I need to close this polyline. I'll just use properties. And then at the bottom, I want to make sure it's closed. So if I switch it to closed, it will automatically close that. All right, so that one's closed. And then I want to set the grading limit. The grading limit is not going to be right at the edge. I should be able to grade a little bit past the edge. So I'm going to do an offset of about 20 feet from the edge of the parking lot. All right, so I'm allowing the grading optimization to grade in this space to transition from my parking lot back to existing ground. All right, so now that I have the polylines, they're closed polylines, I have to look through here and I need to start off with that grading limit, which is this one. So I click on grading limit. It tells me to select objects. I'm going to click on that outer polyline, enter. This window pops up and I can give it a name. I'll just call it grading limit. Oops. You can call it whatever you want, right? It could be parking lot edge or whatever. So grading limit, we have a minimum and a maximum slope that we will allow in this area. So I will just allow, so maybe you say, I don't want to ever be flat, right? So maybe 0.5% to 33% in that area. As we run the tool, if this doesn't work, we can always come and adjust it. All right. Let's see what else. Grading limit. If you want to know what any of these settings are, there are little eyes here. So align surface, for example, if I click on the letter I, whoops, click. It says requires that the triangles in the zone align themselves on a plane. This property cannot be combined with exclusive drainage, right? So as you go through this, you can click on each of these eyes and learn more about them. So exclusive drain, if selected, the zone considers only drain elements, low points, or drain lines. So example, you can take a look at those. So for this example, I'm going to leave the defaults. If something doesn't look right or doesn't do what we want it to do, we can come back and change them. Depth of material. This is a parking lot, and depth of material, I guess, would be the thickness of the pavement. But if we leave this at 0, this is going to actually represent the top of pavement when it's done. If we put in a depth of, I don't know, 2 feet or something, then it's going to show below the pavement, right? So this would be the thickness of that pavement. So do you want this surface to represent the dirt or do you want this thickness or this surface to represent top of pavement? So in this case, I'll just use 0 for the top of pavement. And yes, this is a grading limit. So I didn't change too much. I basically changed the minimum slope to 0.5%. And I gave it a name. So I'll go ahead and close this. Once it's defined over in the grading object browser, if I look at it, I have one grading limit. If I click on the little arrow, that's the name of that grading limit. Yeah. Okay. So let's continue. Always hit escape. After you've selected an object and you see it in the object browser, always hit escape. If you do not hit escape, when you click on the next thing in the tool palette, it turns the object that you have selected into that type of grading object. So make sure you hit escape. Okay, so the next thing I need is a zone. I want to define the entire parking lot as a zone. So I'll go over here and click zone. And then we click the edge of that parking lot, enter. So this one pops up. So this one I'll just call parking lot. Oops, parking. Let's see. Use global constraints. It tries to figure out everything based off of your grading limit. So I want to customize slopes in this zone. So in this zone, I'm using a minimum slope of 2% and a max slope of 5%. So these are pretty flat, right? When you're driving in that parking lot, you don't want it to be too steep. All right, so 2 to 5% for the parking lot area. And I am going to use align surface. So what this actually does is it tries to grade that parking lot zone so that it follows the grading of the existing ground, right? Since typically, I don't have any labels on here, but in general, the parking lot is higher on this side and lower on this side, according to the existing ground. So it's going to try to follow that kind of direction for the new grading. So align to surface. What else? Depth of material. So I'm not going to add a depth. I want it to represent top of pavement. This line that I've selected will become a break line. Later on, once the optimization is done, you can export or import feature lines and a surface. So the feature line is the break line. This is not a grading limit. Let's see. I think we're good on that one. All right, so I'll close that. And we'll see over in the grading object browser, the zone has been created and it's called parking lot. Okay. After that, so I had grading limit, I have my parking lot zone. I want to define the building pads. I'll hit escape again. This rectangle is a building pad. This rectangle is a building pad. So typically your building pads are going to be flat. Over in my tool palette, I have building pad at the top. I'll select, actually, this is not a line yet. Let me escape. I need to end copy from the XREF. So end copy. So I'm going to grab the building here, the building here. And I just want to double check that these are closed polylines. That one is closed. That one is closed. Okay, great. All right, so now I'm going to use the building pad from tool palette. Grab this one first, enter. I'll call this one large building. Oops. Let's weird when I move my cursor, it stops typing there. Large building. Okay. Let's see what this one says. Specify elevation range. So if you had a general idea of where this building pad should be, you could use this elevation option. Why is it not doing it now? Oh, it doesn't like the space. Anyways. So I don't know why it's not doing it, but usually you can turn this on and you can specify your elevation range. If you don't have any idea what elevation it should be, just don't turn this on and it will figure it out for you. So in this example, I'm letting it figure it out for me. Let's see. Level grading with pad. Yes, I want the pad to be level. Depth of material. So similar to what I was mentioning earlier, if you give it a depth, it's going to give you a polyline or a feature line that represents the bottom of the foundation. If you do not give it a depth, it will represent the top of foundation. So for the large building, I will leave this depth so you can see what happens. For the smaller building, I'll use a depth of 0 so you can see the difference. And drain away. Yes, I want the rest of the parking lot to drain away from the building pad. Okay, so I'm gonna close that one. I'll have to do one for the small building. Let me hit escape. Building pad, select it, enter. This will be the small building pad. I'll let it figure out my elevation. I do want it level. This one I'll try representing the top of the foundation. So I'll use a depth of 0, draining away. Okay. All right, so under building pads, I now have 2 buildings defined. Okay. Let's see. So let's say I want to be more specific in my grading in this area. So this is where all the cars will be parked. And so in this area, I want it to be very flat. Usually when you're driving, you can have 5% slope in the direction that you're driving, right? So around here and around here. But in here, you're going to be turning all different directions. So you probably want it to be more flat. I want it to be about 0.5% to 2% in this area. So let me draw another polyline. I'm going to do it really rough. So maybe like here. Yeah, the point of the webinar is to get you the concept. And of course, you have your own designs that you can fix. So let me close that. Okay, so this general area, I want that to be 0.5% to 2%. So I'm going to use the parking lot grading object. So here it is, parking lot. So I'll click on that. Okay, good. I didn't have anything selected. I'm going to select this polyline that I just made, enter. There we go. The name, it's calling it zone 3. Let's see if I can call it something else. Parking area. It doesn't like spaces, so I'll put an underscore. Similar things to before, I have a minimum and a maximum. This will be minimum of 0.5%, maximum of 2%. And I'm going to use the defaults in this area. I don't need a depth. I'll use a depth of 0. It will create a break line around that area. Yep. All right, so it's good. We're just setting these general constraints. Let's do a couple more things. So I have my grading limit. I have my overall zone that I'm grading. I have the parking lot area. I have my building pads, right? So another thing that we might want to do is kind of give it a guide on where the water drains. And it's already going to follow the kind of grading scheme of the existing ground going from north to south here, but maybe I want to put in a flow line. So again, doing a very rough job, I'm going to draw a polyline, and you always want to start at the high point, right? So I'm going to click here for the high point of my flow line, and I'm going to click here for the low point of my flow line, always going from high to low. I'll draw another one, polyline from high point And then maybe it connects up. They both have the same low point. Okay, so this is going to be a flow line. This is going to be a flow line. So I'm going to go ahead and define that. It's called a drain line. So click here, click on this polyline, enter. So drain line 1, I'll keep that name. It's going to become a break line and it knows it's going high to low. So that's good. I'll define a second one. I'll escape drain line, picking on this one, enter. Drain line 2, it's a break line. Okay. Good. So under grading objects, drain line, I have my 2 drain lines. And then last thing, let's say this is my overall low point of the whole project. I can specify that using a COGO point, a Civil 3D point. So insert tab, home tab, points, point creation tools. I'll manually create a COGO point. It says, what's the location? I'll click at this endpoint. It wants to know a description. I'll just call it low point. And elevation, I'm going to use 0. It will figure out the elevation for me. All right, so there's my low point. And then here we have in the tool palette, we can define this low point. So I'll go ahead and click that, select my point, enter. It's going to be called low point. And that's all I need. All right. So I do have a few things defined. I think we're ready to try out this grading optimization. Let me save my work just in case. Okay, so back to Analyze tab. This grading objects button opened up the 2 palettes, the tool palette and the object browser. But to start the optimization, it's this button here, Optimize. And it says to select your EG surface. So this is the surface that it's going to do the iterations on. So I'm going to click on this one here. So it hasn't actually started. It's just opened up my surface with my design. You can see from the colors that it recognizes the different areas. So the grading limit, the zone, the building pads, the parking space, those drain lines, and that point, right? It already recognizes all those objects. There are your settings over here. So this is the object browser. If you wanted to change anything, these are the zones that we defined, the building pads that we defined, the grading limit. So for example, if I want to change something about the grading limit, I can just double click. It opens up those properties. So I had my minimum slope, my maximum slope, and you can do this at any time. You can run the optimization, stop it, change something, and then run it again. So any of these things, if I wanted to change the parking lot zone, I double click. So this is the parking lot zone. I'm going for 2% to 5%. So at any time you can make those changes. Let's see if there's anything else I want to point out before we start. Right here, next to the optimize button, there is this kind of settings button. It's called options. So this options window pops up when I click that button. This allows you to choose, do you want to balance, cut, and fill? So if you do want to balance, cut, and fill, how balanced do you want it to be? 100% balanced, it's going to take all day. Or do you want it to be like pretty close to balanced? You can switch this. If you don't care about balancing, you can leave it at 0, right? So you have those options. Maybe we'll try to balance. Let's see. Maybe I'll try to do like 85% balanced. There's also minimize earthwork. If you want to try to reduce the amount of dirt you're moving around on site, you can say, okay, let's try our best to minimize earthwork, right? You can pick a percentage. I'll just do like 50%, maybe something like that. And then you can also tell it to smooth out the surface. So these are just options. Once you've taken a look at those options, you can close that. And then I'm going to hit optimize. We're probably not going to let it run to the end because it takes some time, but I'll start it. And you get to watch do the I can't talk now. Iterate. You get to watch it iterate. In this little graph, it starts at the top, and as it gets closer to the bottom, it's getting closer and closer to your perfect design. And it has these color codings. So orange means iteration required. So it's currently orange. Red, review needed. So maybe there's some standards or slopes that you need to check. And then there's solution likely. So once this comes down and turns green, that means it's pretty close to the final product. Up here, you can look at coloring to show cut fill. You can show the triangulation. So red means it's still working on it. Let's see what else. Right now it's showing contours. You can also show triangulation. You can zoom. You can rotate. And then there's notifications. So down here, I have this little bell notification with says 3 notifications. Let me see what it says. Edges of grading limits are too steep. So it's exceeding my 33%. So then there's some suggestions. Increase the max slope. Okay, so let me do that. Let me dismiss that. I'll come back to these. I will click stop. There we go. I click stop. And so I'm going to go back to my object browser. I'm going to look at my grading limit, and it says that it can't meet this max slope. So let me let me make it higher. I'll say 50%. So 50% is now going to be my maxed allowable slope in that grading limit. And I'll optimize again, see if it gets better. So it's looking better, but I still have some notifications. Edges of grading limit are too steep. So I already worked on that. Let me dismiss that one. One or more zones has exclusive draining enabled, but there are no drain elements. Okay, I probably should not use exclusive draining. I got to figure out which zone it is. Let's see. Object browser zone. Not this one. Okay, so in the parking area, I had used exclusive draining, and it's saying that's not going to work out. So let me stop it again. And I'll turn off exclusive draining, and then I'll optimize again. What else? One or more zones is completely overlapping by one or more other zones. Check the order of the zones. Let's see. Can we drag these? Oh, you can. So the parking area should take higher priority than the parking lot. So I just click and drag to change the order. So I'm putting parking area at the top. So I'm going to dismiss that. Hopefully it gets better and better. Let me stop it real quick so I can start to optimize again. Okay, so definitely it's working on more areas. It had a whole bunch of notifications, and I tried to resolve those. So you can definitely see the grading limit here. This is the zone that we defined first. Parking, building pads. Okay, so it's looking better. This chart is still in the orange, so I got to let it run a little bit more. But I don't want to take up too much time. So it's definitely not done, but I want to show you what this creates. So I'm going to stop it. And there's a button down here that says update drawing. So I'm going to click update drawing. So here, you can bring in a surface for whatever it created, right? You can bring in that new surface. You can bring in feature lines from the surface that it created. You can bring in points. So you have an option to create a brand new surface or update your existing surface. Your existing surface is this one that we're looking at. So let's say I wanted to create a separate surface, create new surface. And you may want to do this a few different times because you may get different results depending on what you've put into your grading objects. So this one, I'll just call this parking lot number 1, right? So it's my first try. For the style, see if I can click on that. I'll use 1 in 5 proposed. And I'll bring in feature lines and points so you can see those. I'll click finish. I have a question.
That's where I was like, the holiday that the drug that's what we're trying to flatter me.
All right, it's thinking hopefully it'll be done soon. Right, so I'm going to go take a look at tool palette. So tool space. In tool space, this is the EG that was data referenced. This is the grading optimization that it started from. And this is the parking lot 1 that it just generated. So I'm going to turn the grading optimization 1 off. No display. And so the one that we're looking at right now is the parking lot 1. So you can see from the contours, look how smooth those contours are, right? I'm going to grab it and show you an object viewer. If I rotate that, zoom in a bit, you can see the building pad is flat. Building pad is flat. The parking area is pretty flat as well. It created kind of like a flow line right here. You can see the grading limit compared to the parking lot edge. So it did a pretty good job with the mass grading, right? It's not going to do like curb ramps or things, but it did pretty good with that overall mass grading, even though we didn't even wait till the end. We stopped it pretty short. So it did a pretty good job. The thing about this is if you click on the feature lines that came in, so for example, this one here, you'll see that there's a lot of elevation changes along that feature line. Right, so many elevation changes. So you may not want to use this feature line as your final design. If you want more like constant slopes here and there, you can go to Elevation Editor and you can take a look at what it's done. So you can say, okay, in general, this is the elevation of the parking lot. In general, these are some slopes that it was using, right? And you can either modify this by either like, where's that tool? Weeding out points, right? You can weed out elevation points, regular points, or you can just use that as like a guide to create your own feature line. So that's the thing that I don't like about this tool is like so many elevation changes along the feature lines. But overall, the surface looks pretty good, right? It looks pretty smooth. So that is what it does. You can always go back and click optimize again, let it run more. You can always change the design slopes and things and then let it run again. And then you can export again the surface, the feature lines, and you just use it as a guide, I would say, to get you started on that project. Okay. So I do want to spend some time working on, we only have like maybe 20 minutes on a pond example. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to close it. I'm going to use a separate drawing file for our pond example. Let me show you the steps. So this is parking lot. I'm going to run through the dry pond. I don't think we have time for wet pond, but I did put in wet pond example in the PowerPoint. So you guys can give it a try, but we're going to work on dry pond for now. Let me copy the steps into the chat in case you want to see them. All right. Okay, so same setup as before. So I'll just start new drawing. Xref, or let me save it. Save. I'll override my old pond. I'll Xref my base file. And here's the pond that I'm going to be working on. And so I need my surface, which is a data shortcut. So I'll have my EG surface, bring that in. Border only. So again, way too big. I need to go make my own grading optimization surface. And I'll do 1 in 5 existing for this. All right, so that's just an empty surface. I need to paste in my EG. Right, and then I need to add an outer boundary. So here is the pond. I'll draw a closed polyline around that area. I'll add that as an outer boundary. Okay, so this is the starting point for my grading optimization. Save. And similar to before, we need to define the objects for this project. So I have this outline of the pond, which is in my Xref. I'll end copy that. I need a grading limit. So I'm going to offset the edge of the pond 20 feet again. It's kind of small, but hopefully that'll be enough. And so then if you don't have these tools open, remember that was the Analyze tab, Grading Objects button. Both buttons are blue here, so I should have my tool palette and my Grading Object browser. I'll minimize my tool space. Okay, so first thing I want to define is the, oops. Oh, I'm in my PowerPoint on the other side. Okay, I want to define the grading limit. Let me hit escape first, and I'll go to grading limit. I'll select that outer polyline, enter. And so again, you can give it a name, grading limit, minimum maximum slopes for that area. I'll do 0.5 and 33. Let's see. I'll leave the other defaults. All right, so grading limit is done. It shows up on the left here. Escape. Next, this is a pond. So there is a grading object called pond. So here's pond. Select the inner line. Enter. Okay, so this is where I get to define the shape of my pond. So pond 1 is fine. You have two options. You have dry pond and you have wet pond. So dry pond is on a normal day, the pond is empty. Wet pond is on a normal day, you still have some water in there, but there's space for additional water when it rains, right? So wet pond has some water, but leaving storage volume for if we have a large storm. So I'll start off with dry pond. We don't have time to do both. You get to put in the minimum storage volume that you need for the pond. So I'm going to use 50,000 cubic feet. You get to put in a max storage depth. I'm going to put in 4 feet. This is my boundary right now, but you have an option to allow that boundary to change if necessary. So I'm going to leave that on. I'll allow it to change. You have an option to have a safety bench. So a safety bench is like, if someone were to walk around the edge of the pond and fall in, do you want them to fall this far, or do you want them to have like a little ledge that they're going to fall not too far on from the outer edge? So in this case, I'm not going to use a safety bench right now. Let's see, berm. So berm is defining this portion, and it has little letters. So A shows you this is the depth A. And then this is B, this is the berm width. So for the berm width, I'll keep it at 10 feet. Then C is freeboard. So C is right here. This is how much space will not be filled with water. So C, I will use a freeboard of 1 foot. And then D is the slope here towards the bottom. I'll use a slope of 3 to 1, right? And all of this can be changed later as you run your optimization. So that looks good. And let's see. We're going to run the optimization. I'm going to hit escape. So all I defined was the grading limit and the pond here. I'm going to hit that button, optimize at the ribbon. Oh, it tells me to select EG, so I'm selecting this surface. Okay, so you can already see it's picked up the different areas or zones. And when I click this optimize options, let's see. So I have my minimum, my maximum. This is the maximum number of iterations. Here's the balance, cut, fill. So I'm not going to balance, cut, fill in this case. It's going to be mostly cut. And what else? I think we'll run it. Optimize. I'll zoom in. Oops. So this one's going pretty quickly. It's getting down to a place where it might be the perfect design. Still in the orange, but it's getting closer to the final design. Notifications, I have one. Let's see. There are no drain elements. I'm okay with that. All right. So let's say this is good enough. Oh, it's getting to green. So that is pretty good. So now that it's green, that's great. I'm going to stop it. Okay, so now that I've stopped it, I'll update my drawing. So again, you have options. You don't have to bring all of this in, but you could bring in the surface. You could bring in the feature line. So I'll do both for this class. And then the name, this will be Pond 1, just in case I want to try a different design. For the style, I'll do 1 and 5 proposed. And it's going to make a new surface. Finish. Let me show you while we're waiting on this. This is what I want to do. So we've run the optimization. We are sending the results back into Civil 3D. I want us to look at the surface that it created, create a new surface from the feature lines, and then analyze that to see the volume. Because I put in a volume of 50,000 cubic feet. I want to see if it actually got that for me. Let me put this in the chat.
Is now a good time to ask a quick question?
Sure.
If you actually, if you can leave it to change the size of the basin, if you put in a volume and maybe like a slope that you're looking for, and then that external grading surface disturbance boundary, it can change the actual size of the basin for you.
Yes. I don't know if it did it on mine. It might have, but yeah, if you have that little, where is it? Pond. Allow boundary change. Yes. If you have this on, then it can make it larger or smaller, but usually larger to meet your minimum. And so the cool thing about the feature line, so this is the surface. I can take a look at it in Object Viewer. Let's see, where's my Object Viewer? I rotate. What it did here was it moved my grading limit. So my grading limit is actually going out further. But you can see that the berm is there, and then we have the slope, and then we have the bottom of the pond. So that is the surface that it generated. The feature lines that it generated, if I click on this feature line, it gives me this feature line tab, and it tells me that's the grading limit, right? If I click on this one, that's the one that I defined as the pond. But if I click on this one, this is what it defined as the berm outside. So I believe it's changed, right? So this is where I started, and this is where it put it. So actually it kept the grading limit, and it moved the top edge of the pond inwards. So it did move that edge. So that's the outside edge of the berm. And then this line is the inside edge of the berm. And this is the bottom of the pond. So it gives a name to each of those feature lines. So yeah, it did definitely move my outer boundary of that pond. So what I want to show you is, did it actually give us the correct storage volume? So instead of using this big surface to do the calculation, I'm going to hide this one and make a new one. Surface properties, no display. And then I'll also hide my original surface. Oops, not that properties. Okay, so I'm just looking at the feature lines. I'm gonna make a new surface. I'll say test storage volume. And then, I don't know, maybe 1 in 5 proposed. All right, so this new surface I just made, test storage volume, I'm gonna add this grading limit, top of berm outside, top of berm inside, and bottom of pond. I'm not gonna use that original line that I had made. So I can add them to my surface as break lines. I'm adding them to my test storage volume surface. And I think we're good here. All right, so this is the surface I just made from the feature lines. I can check it out in Object Viewer real quick. So it's a much simpler surface. It doesn't include the existing ground. Okay, and then let's test it out. So Analyze tab, Design, Stage Storage. This window pops up. You can generate reports. I want it to use average end area to figure out the volume. And I want to define the basin from this entity. So I'll use this button, define basin. Click on this. Whoops, something else popped up. Define basin from surface contours, define basin from polylines. I want to define it from the surface contours. Define and click on the surface. All right, this is what it gives me. So it gives me the different contour elevations. It gives me the area at each contour. And this is the cumulative volume. So we end up with more than what we need.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Can you take this information and put it into HydroFlow?
That is a good question. I actually am not quite sure. I have a coworker, Matt Sparks, who does the HydroFlow and storm sewer analysis and stuff. Let me write that down and I'll ask him. You want to put your email in the chat and then I can send you an email?
Sure.
Yeah. So I wrote myself a note and then I'll email you. But yeah, so this just shows the volume that would fit into that pond, and you can see it's more than what we need if we put in 50,000, right? Yep. So that's cool. You can export this to a table and stuff, but I'll just cancel out. So if you want to do a wet pond, I would say start from scratch. I've tried converting the dry pond to a wet pond and it crashes on me. But if you did want to look at that, that would be, let's see if this will open up. It won't open. So I would say you could start from here. So you would do pond, click on that object, enter. It's not opening. I'll go back to optimize. See. All right, so this is definitely not going to work because I'm picking that smaller surface, but I want to show you the settings real quick. So here's pond. So when I click on my pond, instead of using a dry pond, I can switch it to wet pond. And when you switch it to wet pond, you still have the minimum volume that you want, the max storage depth that you want. You can add a safety bench if you wanted to. And then down here, so all these variables are showing in that graphic. You can define the width of the berm, freeboard, slope. You can define the safety bench, depth, width, slope. And then the permanent pool is what makes it a wet pond. So I have my slide too. I'll show you my slide here. Right, so you have some portion of the pond that is always with containing water or holding water. And then you have the pond capacity that is usually dry unless we have a storm, right? So that permanent water level is what makes it a wet pond. So in here, we can define what is the water depth on a normal day. Is there an aquatic bench and the slope of that aquatic bench? And so if you're not sure about all these variables, you just look at the little picture and you can figure out what you need to put in here. And then you can run it again and it'll do that for you. But when you finish this pond, it will give you feature lines for the whole pond all the way from top to bottom. When you've tried to look at the volume of the pond, you can make a new surface like I did, but use the permanent water level feature line as the bottom of that surface. Don't go all the way down to here, right? Because this already has water in it. You want to see what's the capacity portion. So that permanent water level feature line is the one that you would use for the bottom of your design. Well, it's the bottom of like what you would check for capacity. Yeah, so it's 11:30. I tried to run through that quickly. If you guys have, thank you. If you guys have any questions, this is our tech support line. This is our tech support email. You can also reach out to me. I can email you this PowerPoint if you reach out. I'll be sending this recording to Aaron and he'll put it up on our YouTube site. So you can watch it again if you want to. But hopefully you get the main idea of how the tool works. All right. Any quick questions? You're welcome. You're welcome. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good day.